Welcome, everyone, to the First Chesapeake Town Hall. My name's Alex Bryant. I'm the Executive Director of First Chesapeake, and I'm joined here today with Isaiah Mariner, the Director of FRC. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
To to kick things off, why don't we introduce ourselves again and just set the stage for everyone. So again, Alex Bryant, my background is in nonprofits, so specifically nonprofit management and board management and fundraising and programs. You all probably remember me last year sending tons and tons of emails around this time as the director of programs, and that would have been for FRC and FTC. In August, I became the executive director for First Chesapeake, and very excited to steer into the next chapter. I want to set the tone for this evening. I know that things are not ideal, and I know that we're coming out of a year too where previously things were not ideal. So these are building years. As we welcome Isaiah and we welcome Shelly and we welcome Anne onto the team, we're really assembling the team that First Chesapeake needs to improve and to get better. And so we really appreciate everyone's support and patience and understanding as we are navigating this kind of rocky onboarding period. So again, we apologize for the FRC distributions and all of that. We understand that it is not ideal, and we really super appreciate everyone's feedback and suggestions and comments because we are feverishly taking all that information in and are excited to share more and to dig deep into that tonight. Isaiah?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I am Isaiah Mariner. My background is in mechanical engineering. I went to North Carolina A&T, graduated with from a bachelor's in that. For the last 7 years and a month or so, I was a physics teacher, CTE teacher here in Portsmouth, and I've also been a coach of Team 3359. So I'm still the coach, but now that I'm in this new position, I'm excited to see how I can help everybody because I really love this organization. I did not know what I was getting into when I first signed up, when I first became a coach. I think that's a common thread when it's your first year. But since then, since Rumbling the Roads 2016, I've been all in, and I'm here now to just see and serve you all in a different capacity. So I know it's been a little bit of some confusion, and every year we always end up having something that is a little bit of a tizzy that we have to deal with. And this year we're going to make sure we deal with it. So thank you. We've seen comments, we've seen questions. We're going to get to you the questions that you all have submitted today for this. We've already started talking about them. Some of the questions that came up, we already had motion. We already had a motion. We had some things in play. So we'll tell you about that. And we want to make sure that we can just make this season as wonderful and fluid as possible. There's always going to be some kind of challenge we got to overcome, but my job is to help us overcome it. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see you, and we're going to get into it this evening. So
That's
please
wonderful.
make sure you leave your comments over here. If you have questions, we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. If we do not already have an answer, we'll get it out to you as soon as possible. We've been working on that diligently this week. So thank you again.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Isaiah. Um, so I'm going to set things off and just kind of set the stage as to our understanding of where we are. And I'll do the speaking because Isaiah started last Monday. So he had no role in this. He's just kind of helping us put out some of these fires and problem solve best we can. So an update on the venues. The big issue right now is Ashland week one, right? And so as we're looking across the table, the way that we did venue outreach this year in order to kind of field some new venues was we did direct outreach. So we reached out to a handful of venues and coaches in a hope to spur some new venue locations, to spur some new volunteers and volunteer pools, and to make sure that we had a good geographic distribution. I know when I started around this time last year, the biggest issue is that we had about 29 teams that we needed to move because we had a seventh event that dropped. And those teams were often moving 4+ hours away. So a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of really just heartbreaking conversations. with FRC teams, and we didn't want that to happen this year. So getting that geographic distribution was our number one goal. Unfortunately, we don't have full control of our venues. So over the summer, we did lose a Maryland venue. We worked throughout the summer with that host and with other Maryland representatives and TAC to make sure to try our best to get into a Maryland venue. We're really aware of how densely populated those Maryland teams are, and we want to make sure that travel is not a hurdle. It shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't be a reason why you don't compete. So we're trying our best to do a good distribution. Uh, for us, the way that looks is 3 events in Virginia, 3 events in Maryland, and ideally 1 event in DC. But typically, that 1 event in DC is looking like Northern Virginia or Southern Maryland. We tend to go Northern Virginia just because the venues tend to be a little bit larger and it's a little bit easier to get into those. So that's how that happened. We were really grateful for Ashland because they came in last minute and helped us set the stage for an equal distribution. Had they not come in, we would not have had enough plays for everyone to have 2. Last year, we had 109 teams, I believe, register, and we had about 7 teams that did not compete in a second event. That was at their choice, but still, we want to make sure that we do have enough plays for all those teams. And so that's why we really wanted to add that 7th venue. We are at a little awkward growth stage as far as adding that 7th venue. As everyone knows, we need 28 teams for an event to make sense. And we are just not quite there yet, especially if we're looking at all these venues having 40. So that was one of the first steps we did, was try and cap some of those venues. We, again, wanted to make sure that we're not penalizing those Maryland teams. And so we capped theirs at higher capacity than the Virginia teams or the Virginia events, just to help with that distribution. So yeah, that's kind of where we're standing. We obviously moved waitlist teams over, and that was kind of at talking with First that they are probably not going to get into those events that they wanted to go to, especially those 2 in Maryland, because they are at capacity, and they needed to see an equal distribution across events, or else they're going to start talking about dropping one. And again, if we drop an event, that means we have to move, at this point, probably 24 plus teams across the district, and it's going to mean a lot more travel for everyone. So that's the absolute last thing that we want to do. Some ways that we're hoping to help with this burden is we have received a small sponsorship from Argosy. That's through that travel incentive grant. If people haven't taken a moment to and they want to, they can go online right now and fill that grant out and move. It's a small grant. We understand that. We understand it's not going to pay for all of travel, but we're trying to do our best here in the 11th hour to accommodate teams. I again remember last year we did not have any grants. We didn't have any plays to help teams, so we just kind of moved them and wished them best of luck. And that is not what we want to do again. So yeah, that's really where we are. That's kind of how we're setting the table. We understand that this is not ideal. This is obviously not how we would like to do it. This is, an unfortunate circumstance, and we do apologize that things have shaped up as they have. Isaiah, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I do. So we see a couple questions coming in that are definitely important. So considering that we wanted a good geographic distribution, what was going on with those Edgewater and Severn being selected, there are a couple different things. Well, there are multiple things that go into venue selection. Some of it Alex touched on earlier, but a big part of it is where are we able to go, and not every school has the size or capacity for that. So as we start moving through lists, we have to cross off and just try to find venues that are close enough to a lot of our teams. That way we can make sure everybody has that chance to get 2 plays. Again, this year fell through, so we don't have that. We don't have another close Maryland event, but we are looking to fill that moving forward for next year to make sure that we have that in play. So to help with that, we already have something out available, I do believe. So if you're interested in hosting, so that way we can find more venues across our district, please reach out to us, let us know. That way we can start making some site visits, seeing what's going on with that. That way we can have a better pool of venues to pull from. That'll really help everybody as we're moving forward. So we are being more open about that this year. It's already out there. I remember seeing it on the website today myself. So we can find that. We can make sure we share that again, and we'll get to it. See it in the chat right there. I love having a powerful team. Um, Another question for the incentive grant, is that specific to northern teams for Blacksburg and Portsmouth? It was not necessarily just for northern teams. It was for teams who had already committed and were willing to transfer over. We wanted to make sure that we could fill both of these events so they could happen. Otherwise, we end up with 20 some teams that have to adjust, and then a bunch of people do not get a chance for a second play. So, given the size of our district and the fact that a few years ago we merged, so Maryland, DC, Virginia, it all became one thing. We're still having that growing pains from having to adjust in a couple of those regards, because now we have to go places we did not have to go 6, 7 years ago, type of deal. I think there was one more point about that I wanted to make, but so we were planning to talk about the travel grant tonight anyway. So Alex, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we had discussed extending the deadline a little bit to
That's
help
right.
and just give another push for anybody that might be willing to make it. There's one thing about the grant that I think is worth noting, and that is that you have to establish a nonprofit through the HCB. It was a hack club bank, and they have a lot of benefits for doing that, but you would have to leave your own if you already have one. And I think that has been a hang up for some people. It's not really a lot that we can do about that. It was part of the stipulations that they established when we reached out to get it. So
That's right.
we're, yeah, we're doing what we can on that regard. So hopefully we still can get some people to take on that initiative. I've been talking to a few teams, and I've heard some of their concerns. So we're going to reach out and see what else we can do if you cannot make that grant. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later when I talk about some more of the initiatives I plan to enact. But for right now, please, if you're available, push the grant. It's there. We are working with some teams, just a few people we already have in mind for it. So, but we still have a couple slots. So we want to make sure we could help as many folks as we could with that, as best as we can with that.
Yeah, and the deadline for that date or for that grant was set by the sponsor. So October 30th is the absolute last day that we have to submit those names to them for processing. And then they have another deadline of November 7th, I want to say,
Mhm.
for setting up that account through the Hack Bank Club. So that's kind of where we are with that. We did want to extend that as long as we could, and we wanted to wait for teams to take advantage of that before we did any shifting or balancings of the plays.
Yes.
Um, to touch on the Edgewater and Severn note, almost 90% of FRC teams are in that district band right around DC. So that does accommodate a bulk of those teams. I think in an ideal scenario for Maryland, we probably are looking at a little bit more Western, maybe like Frederick, and then Central and Eastern. But two Eastern events would still accommodate a grand portion of those teams. So the distribution in Maryland is less, I'd say, critical, save that we do want to have that number, that capacity in Maryland to host those Maryland teams.
Mm-hmm. Edgewater conflict for the week. Other dates explored. That is a good
Yes.
question.
So they were. So Montgomery County is they're kind of the issue. They're the ones who changed their regulations so that their robotics teams can no longer, they don't qualify to rent that space, so they can't host events essentially. As we continue down, it's going to be a huge problem, not just for FRC, but also for FTC. Um, FTC has a little bit more flexibility as we can go to smaller private schools or community centers. But with FRC, it's going to be really tie our hands when it comes to the Maryland schools. Um, I believe Severn's in Anne Arundel County. The but Severn is at Archbishop, which is at a private school, so they don't have to play by the county rules. We're working right now to appeal that. Um, we're really appreciative to Ronnie of Powerhawks, who is leading that charge and is really helping navigate some of those conversations. We also appreciate Rose and Amber, who are um, uh, joining in that conversation and helping to push some of those messages forward. Um, it will be a fairly long battle, I would say, to regain some of those statuses and some of the school systems. And unfortunately, it does seem like a trend, specifically in that area, where they are not opening their doors as readily as they were pre-COVID. I do want to move on from this. So as we're looking at 2025 venues, we don't want to have the same problems arise. We want to have a huge pool of venues to pick from and to select. I was checking in 2023 when we last did an open call. We had 9 venues apply. I'm sorry, we had 8 venues apply. 1 venue applied twice. And of those 8, I think we ended up going with 6 of them, and the 6 were veteran venues. So again, that's something that we are hoping people can look into their school systems, really think about whether or not their school could be a good fit, or if there's another venue in their area that could be a good fit. We don't necessarily have to be in schools. Schools just tend to check a lot of the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So, as Isaiah was saying, that website was published today. I think it's firstchesapeake.org/FRC/host. You can go there and see some of the basic requirements and then some of the fuller requirements, and just submit that form and we'll follow up with you. I think if you've been interested in hosting before and just weren't quite sure if it was too much of a commitment or what exactly would be expected, we can just have a conversation. Glenn and Anne will be there, and so that they can help us navigate through some of the logistics and some of the operation problems, um,
Mm-hmm.
and make it an easy onboarding. Um, so yeah, we really encourage everyone to look at that process. And since we're early in the season, if you have suggestions or comments or ways that we could improve that, we're all ears and we're happy to iterate this as we go along. Certainly nothing set in stone, and no process is really worked out perfectly. So we're always happy to improve upon what we have.
There are a lot of good questions and comments coming in here on this topic, so we're definitely going to do what we can to make note of all of that. Looking out for future venues, push it. Push it. If you know somewhere that might work, email us, let us know. That way we could take a look at it. As far as what some of the requirements are, for any veteran teams, anybody that's already been to an event before, you pretty much have a visual idea of what it would take space-wise in order for that event to work. We do have a list of requirements that are out online, and I guess in the interest of time and space, we won't list all of them here, but it is something that we have available for people to take a look at. So fill out the form, all that other information we can get to you after we get started. Because some of the questions you're asking, we want you to tell us anyway. And if you don't know, your principal would know, or whoever does operations at your school would know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for FRC in particular, we need somewhere with bleachers. Somewhere with bleachers. Try to accommodate at least 1,000 people. Some events have up to 2,000 people. So if the fire marshal says you can't do that, then we probably won't choose that venue. Not automatically, but those are some things we definitely look at, just to give you all a little bit of what we are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to say it, we're really looking for an 800-foot by 100-foot with a ceiling of 25 feet. I know height's going to be, it might be important this game. And then a minimum of 6,000 square feet for pits. So those are the two like absolute bare bone basic minimum needs. Most of the other things, bleachers, uh, Wi-Fi, power, are usually easy enough to resolve if it's not
Hmm.
there, or there are workarounds. So most high schools, I would say, at least the majority that I've been to, can accommodate an FRC uh, event. So I would say most of them are going to be ready. The one that's kind of funky is you do want to make sure that you have a double wide door. I know at my high school, LC Bird, they do not. So they would not be able to host it because we would not be able to get robots in and out of the gym.
Mm.
So that might be the one limiting factor, but for the rest of them, we can pretty much make anything work, and we really would appreciate options and for teams to engage. Um, it's a really wonderful thing. It's really great for the teams, and it's really wonderful for the community, but it can also be a burden. I know, especially when you have teams that are running it year after year after year, sometimes they get a little burned out. They'd love to pass that torch and, show up and volunteer rather than have to organize the whole thing.
Yes.
Um, yeah, let's see. Do you want to
So
dig
there
into
was a
some of
good
these questions that
question.
we have here?
There's one I think that definitely we wanted to talk about that lines up with our agenda for tonight. Is there a way to connect potential hosts with teams who have hosted before? Yes, yes, there is. And one of the ways that we've been pushing that is TAC. So we have a Slack channel. Slack is a communication platform, kind of like Discord, I guess. But safer. So Slack is something that we've been using that. And we have a general Slack for FRC that people can reach out to and get in touch with a lot of the other teams that are there. I also know that there's a couple like different Discord channels and things that are available, but the Slack is something that we are more actively using as First Chesapeake. So that way we can also chime in periodically. You can reach out to us. It's a little less informal. Email is always a thing. We have a couple different contact options at the First Chesapeake website. And I now have access to that. So I've been responding to some people as messages have come through. But the Slack channel and the TAC that we have, the Team Advisory Council, those would be two great ways to get that kind of information. Our community is already very helpful, but getting in touch with the help is always it is sometimes a challenge. It's a hurdle we all have to overcome. So Slack, TAC,
Yeah.
those two things probably the best bet. And then other questions that you have, we are available for that. I have hosted events numerous times at Churchland High School, so we've done this. Man, my first year was definitely a trial by fire. It was, for anybody that's been here for a while, Steamworks was my very first year as a coach and the host. So that took me to the fire. I was able to learn a lot. So I am here to help with a lot of those things also. Feel free to reach out to me. Mariner at firstchesapeake.com. I'm working to be very responsive, so I can answer questions as well. But I really want to push the Slack and the TAC because there are mentors and teams and other people that have already taken up this mantle. So um, we put the Slack link in chat over here, so I see that right there. And Alex, tell me, how do we get more people in touch with our TAC system?
Yeah, absolutely. So TAC is something that I think it was created before our time. Actually, I know Anne was the founder and organizer of that, so we really appreciate that, Anne. Um, it had kind of operated at various stages differently, but we're really wanted to use it as like an advisory council, and we're digging into it more as a tool and as a resource. Last year, we really utilized our FTC TAC. We met monthly, and we were able to dig out a lot of problems and a lot of things and troubleshoot in live time. And so it was just so invaluable. So we've really stepped it up with FRC TAC as well. Having Isaiah, who can be dedicated to that, and Shelly, who can be dedicated to FTC, will be instrumental to that. So they won't just all have to rely on me showing up to meetings. Um, So people can reach out at, I believe it's FRCTAC at firstchesapeake.org, or you can write in the Slack channel, and the TAC they're active in there. So they're always in there. We're forwarding messages to them as we see things pop up or have questions. So that's certainly the best way, the fastest way to get in contact with them. Um, since we're talking about TAC, I do want to go through some of the roles and responsibilities that they have. This team advisory council is set up to, advise, provide recommendations. They are our sounding board for us to bounce ideas off of. And ultimately, they are the voice of the team. So when we feel like we're kind of back against the wall and do not know a way forward, we're going to TAC to say, what do you think about this? What would this mean for the teams that for your team personally? Um, and that is how we're trying to troubleshoot a lot of these problems that just pop up, that just arise. Um, so for TAC, it is 6 to 15, I think, mentors who can be on that council. I think we're under our full capacity, so we can certainly take more. We haven't had TAC elections or nominations in the past recently, but we are going to do that as we come into spring. We need to finalize the deadlines and the dates and everything with TAC, but we chatted with them. I think it's still like the original TAC who was founded. So there are many of them who are ready to roll off and make space for new voices. And then there are some that are staying on and helping to bridge that transition. So we're excited about that resource. Anyone who's interested in TAC, wants to learn more about it, wants to learn how they can utilize it and get on it and participate, please feel free to reach out to Isaiah or myself, or hit us up in Slack, because we would be just over the moon to include you. The TAC meetings are like by far the best meeting of the month. It's just so wonderful. Absolutely. We can move on now. I saw a question. So if you would like to know who's on TAC, you can go under our website, under About, and the Team Advisory Committee is the first drop down there. Sorry, the URL is not as pretty. So it'd be like about dash first dash Chesapeake slash team dash advisory dash committee. It's a mouthful. I hope Matt can drop it in this chat.
He did.
I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go ahead and read off the names because you guys can look them up. But there is our FRC and our FTC TAC. And yes, I think we did address this already, but TAC was intended originally to roll over. People would have at most a 3-year term, but they could roll off every year as needed. So we will be working on that to make sure that those processes are in place and that we do have new people who are stepping up.
Yeah. As I get more involved with TAC, I will send out more information. So once I start creating my newsletters that will be coming out soon, it'll be something that I include since it has been a big topic here tonight. So for anybody interested, there will be more information coming. I will try to make it as accessible as possible. We do have it on the site, but I'll also make sure that I'm consistent and talking about it as we move forward. So yeah, a lot of yes.
Sorry, there's so many questions. About the interaction and support with administrations, absolutely. So First Chesapeake as a nonprofit and as established nonprofit has a little bit more cachet than like a student-run organization, and we hope to utilize that to get things that we need done. So it's not just on the students, it's not just on the mentors. We appreciate some of those introductions and that makes things helpful. But certainly we're behind the scenes, pulling insurance, making sure that we have plans presented, and doing whatever we need to work with that facility or that county school, that school system, sorry, to make those events happen. So Again, it's a little bit easier for veteran events because it's just a copy and paste and they're already pleased. But we understand that onboarding for that first time is going to mean a lot of meetings, a lot of people that are brought in, and a lot of people that we need to convince that this is really a valuable thing. So absolutely, we're on board for that, and we're eager and excited for those conversations. About the TAC member list, it is as up to date as I am familiar with. I know certainly there are people who are less active and more active, but as far as the original, like these names are on the charter, this is correct. Again, I'd say about a third of these are going to roll off in the spring. Another third will roll off next year, and the last third will roll off the year after that. That's kind of how we're thinking about doing that transition. Um, and we do have room for, I think it was 15 coaches. So we would ideally like to have as many people as possible. The meetings are in the evening, so it can be tricky scheduling wise. So some people can only engage in certain ways. But yeah, absolutely. We do appreciate everyone who took the time to write in questions from our poll. And maybe Isaiah, now is the time to dig into some of these. We hope some of them have been answered, but there are some good ones about volunteers and team stats that we'd like to spend some time fleshing out.
Yeah.
But I like the first one from Preston. Thank you, Preston, for all of your questions. Um, as new leaders of First Chesapeake, what is your vision for the future, and where do you see the district in a year and 5? I'm gonna let Isaiah go first on your like 7th day.
Yeah, no pressure, right? So where do I see the First Chesapeake next year? Where do I see us in 5 years? Next year, I would like for us to have a 5% growth in teams. I want us to have a far more stable venue selection. That way we don't have some of the same problems we had this year, which would have been filling all of the events that we had across our region, and also some of the teams falling off. So there are some new teams that I'm looking at. I know there are some areas that are working on developing teams. So I'm gonna be working on that this year so we can grow. My goal would be to get at least 5 new teams each year for the next 5 years. And of course, lose nobody. So if we lose somebody, I'll change my goals as we go along. But that's the start. Um, and therefore, that means that we'll also end up having to create more events moving forward down the line. In order to do that, though, we have to deepen our volunteer pool. So we are working on our volunteer recruitment system, retention system also. And one of my personal initiatives would be finding some ways to prevent our people from getting so burnt out. Haven't done first for a few years. I know it's a lot to go into this. So we want to establish some kind of support system so that way we are not getting to that point where we're just exhausted all the time. And I get it. Competition, you're going to be exhausted. We got to make our peace with that. But aside from those days, looking at the year, looking at the season, I want to make sure that we move through it and we're still healthy individuals as we're dealing with it. I see something that just came up, and that's another one of the initiatives that I've been working on this week and that I want to see us establish moving forward. I know some teams that have been able to generate $50,000+ for their team a year. And when I first heard that, I was like, that's outrageous. But then I started to realize it wasn't. And I started to see all the different ways that they made it happen. For anybody that decides to host an event, you can use that as a major fundraiser for one. My team pretty much lived off of that for a while. Thank you for your concessions. But one of the things I think we have to focus on a lot more is growing the business mindset of our teams. I heard this a lot, that first is more than robots. But if you only focus on getting your robot built, you're probably going to struggle getting the competition. So I want to make it a point to help more teams get sponsors, to help guide them through that process. And there's a lot of information out there for that. And I want to make sure that I'm touching base with some of these teams that are struggling so that they know it's there. Because if your coach is a teacher, they might not have time to go and look into all of that because they still have to grade work and teach lessons. Um, so we're working on that end. That's why I want to make sure that we have some of these open channels. That way, some of the issues we have, we can have our community help us fill, like venues, the number of volunteers, reaching out to people that have this information. I do not have a lot of contacts in the Maryland, DC area, so I will need help learning who knows all the stuff there. And there are a few people that I have in touch that can help me with that, but this is something I'll be reaching out to more of the community about. So financially stabilizing teams is one of my goals for the next few years. I want to make it not so much a copy paste type pipeline, but I want it to be more of a focus for teams that they have to establish some sort of business mindset in order for them to survive, in order for them to thrive in this. Because the teams that do the best are the ones that are pretty much getting in $20,000 to $50,000 plus sponsorship packages and things like that each year. So that's really where we want to go on that end. Um, so some of the other goals, seeing some stuff pop up that is touching on things I would like to do. Reclaiming old sponsors, definitely. We're working on that. We are engaged in making that happen. We got stuff that we've been working on previously, and it's something that we've been talking about, and we're going to continue talking about. So as we get more details that we can share, we will share. For now, uh, I really can just tell you that we are working on that pretty actively. There were several sponsor meetings several sponsorship calls and talks that came about this week. So it's in the works for the future. Um, Sorry, I got to going off and down a couple rabbit holes because moving words caught my eye. Um, my goal for the next 5 years is to increase our team population by at least 25 teams overall, 5 teams a year. So we're going to have to look and support those teams and also to help teams be more healthy, healthy mentally, healthy financially, and healthy in terms of actually building the robot as well, because that's a major part of this, right? So I'm looking at pretty much that threefold health factor for our teams, and and also deepening our volunteer pool. That way, we have more people willing to facilitate some of these things because we're going to need more events. It's already like a question, but we can't handle more events without more people. So there's a need for it, but we need to recruit, and we're working on that. All right, I did a lot of talking. I know there's more that's coming. So Alex, your goals on this one?
Yeah. I mean, I think that as I was going through some of the questions that we had earlier today, I just found myself writing sustainability, sustainable again and again and again. I think growth is really exciting, and growth is certainly like the end goal. But as many people have pointed out, and what the numbers show is we're losing teams year over year. And just specifically in FRC, when we look at FTC, it's not that we don't have that problem. FTC has their own problems. But really it comes down to time, mentors, space, and money. And I think as we're looking at this now, so we're not seeing new rookie teams getting started. So that means there's a huge barrier right there, a huge barrier of entry. So that's one problem to address. And we have seen, I think, almost 9 teams lost every year since 2020, which is a staggering amount. Um, and it makes it makes planning very challenging. The loss in teams means that we're going to send potentially less people to worlds. Um, and ultimately, it's just upsetting when a team goes out or a team sits out for a year. The likelihood that they're going to come back the next year is just very diminished. So we're doing everything in our power to look at those teams, to reach out to them, figure out what's going on. And I can in the handful that I know I've personally talked to, it's space and mentor burnout. So one of those things we can address quite easily. What are the programs for mentors? What are the support networks that we can provide? That is a lot of what we talk with about TAC. Um, how can we connect mentors with other mentors? Provide that ecosystem of training and support. Um, and how can we make this fulfilling and impactful again, especially post COVID when everything kind of shut down and people had so many other things that they could do and other ways to spend their time. Um, so as we're looking again for teams, I think a 5% growth, like Isaiah is saying, that's really wonderful. But for me, it's really going to be how can we stop the drop? Um, we need that growth, or else our numbers are just going to really plummet,
Hmm.
which is what we're seeing this year. Um, but yeah, it's all coming down to sustainability, and that kind of goes across the board, right? So first, Chesapeake's had a rocky past few years. Certainly, a lot of leadership change, a lot of change in sponsorship because of that, a lot of change in way things are run and way things operate. And so, what we're hoping to do again with Isaiah and Anne and Shelley is to build the team that's going to be here for the next at least 5 years. Ideally, we're all staying here until you kick us out. We're going to the grave in First Chesapeake. But with that sustainability, with that tenure, we hope to build pipelines. We hope to build playbooks so that if Isaiah is like, hey, I'm going to go be director of FRC for First, we're like, that's amazing. We have the playbook for the next director of FRC to come in and to pick up day one where he left off. So we're working on all of those things. We're working on standardizing some processes. It's a little bit easier with FRC than FTC. So anyone from FTC, we apologize. We are troubleshooting with all of those too. Um, but yeah, I think it really comes down to how can we rebuild the foundation, um, re-earn the trust of the community, and then do the thing, make us successful, make sure that we have teams wherever a team wants to be, make sure that our events are running smoothly, that we have volunteers aplenty. Um, I think all of those things are goals, but we need to kind of fix the foundation first and start from within before we try and problem solve outside of the house, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. All right. We had a lot of other questions that came in. On our open survey before we got started tonight that I think we wanted to touch on.
One
Some of
I can one I can share right now is the volunteer question. Just because I've
them.
seen that in the chat a couple times. I went ahead and made this. Hopefully this works. This chart. And as you can see, it's our volunteers over time. So it starts in 2018. This is the latest data that I could access, and then it goes to 2023. So FRC is that blue line, FTC is the red line. Obviously, the low point here is 2021, but FTC has actually ticked back up. So I think they actually just surpassed where they were in 2018. They're not past their highest point, obviously, in 2020. But for FRC, when we talk about that, I think we're like 40% was the number that was shared. We're really looking at that compared to 2019 versus where we are. So yes, volunteerism is low. Yes, it is harder to reach people, but that's not to say that there are, yes, this is unique volunteers. Um, and that's not to say that they're not out there. So it's just how do we engage with them? How do we reach them? And like I've seen so much in the chat, how do you have them have a good time, right? People are volunteering, they're committing so many hours of the day after a work week. We cannot, it cannot be a terrible experience or else they'll never come back.
Right.
It has to be rewarding for them. It has to be enjoyable and fun, and it should be. It's a robotics competition. This should be fun. Um, so building that culture back into the volunteerism, getting the numbers back to where we need to, is something that we're keenly aware of and certainly focusing on. But I just do want to share that it's not all terrible. It looks like we're actually doubling year over year. Um, And we've already had a lot more companies this year step up and say, we want to send 50 judges. We want to send 100 volunteers. So with those people, we're going to, obviously, they're not all going to come back year over year, but that helps our entry point, and that helps bring new energy and new faces and new friends to the program. So we are excited about that.
Yes, indeed. I also have a couple interesting ideas for how we could potentially get some new volunteers in areas near some of the events. There are a couple. There are a few markets I feel as though were untapped that we could utilize. And markets, I mean, just places for volunteers. So I was thinking about different professional organizations, fraternities, sororities. It's a lot of organizations that are dedicated to education that I am not used to seeing at first events. So I'll be looking into more of those and trying to reach out to them once I get my feet underneath me. What markets can we utilize? I'm thinking about nonprofit organizations in particular, if that's about my question. That I just have not normally seen. We focus a lot on tech industries, and we need to continue with that. But I want to get to some of the social organizations that exist that again, like I said, I have not yet seen at some events. Some people might be doing it, but I have a list of orgs in mind, so I'm working on that too.
Absolutely.
Some of the questions in here. So, Alex, was there another question that was real high on your list from our survey at first?
Yeah, so
Chat.
I'm just going in order that we've received them, and skipping over the ones that I think that we've answered. What we can actually do, Isaiah and I both have like written responses to all of the town hall question forms. So tomorrow we'll just publish a blog of a Q&A back and forth, so you can see all the questions and see our answers. So if we don't get to it tonight, we'll hopefully have it answered and publicly available for everyone. But so this one's from Joey. Thank you, Joey, from 614. The question is really around the review process for events. And I think this is an excellent question and something we do want to dig into. As we did it last year, we had an internal team and some external stakeholders that we were reaching out to. This was before the FRC TAC was really kind of being utilized. This year, we really want to lean on the FRC TAC. So those 15 people for making that selection. As we are thinking about experience, about cost of venues, about distribution and capacities, all of those are coming into play as we're thinking about where events should be. And we want to make sure that we shop that around and share that information as broadly as we can, so that we can make sure that we're making the best choices, available to us. That won't really mitigate if administration changes down the road and things shift and move away, but hopefully it will make sure that we have a great lineup of events, that the events are not competing with each other week to week, and that we do see that geographic and team distribution that we're looking for. So yeah, thank you for that question, Joey.
There were a lot of questions that came in early about how we're selecting events, what are we doing for hosting next year. So a lot of those questions came up. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but seeing I'm looking at our survey here, and I just want to reiterate, we are looking for more venues. If you think you know of a place, let us know. We have the survey out there, so that way we can reach the community and make sure we have everybody where we need them, have enough events where we need them to be. So to that point, we want to make sure that we can get our events. Our goal is to have our events decided as early as we can. We had a meeting earlier this week and it came up. We want to make sure we get it all out there very early. Very early. So please reach out to me. I'll come to a site visit. If you know somewhere, just let me know. It's high on the list. Let's see. I feel like we talked about that one. Lots of questions about key volunteers as well. I've seen that in the chat a few times, and also in our pre-town hall survey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can dig into that. So key volunteers obviously are so important to the event and to the success of the event. I saw someone in the chat was talking about
Retention.
rookie volunteers versus like trained volunteers. And that's exactly it. We want to make sure that our key volunteers, every key volunteer this year is going to have a shadow, someone who they're helping mentor, helping bring on. It happens naturally in some cases, and some in other cases, people are just spread so thin that they can't kind of accommodate. But it's a real emphasis this year. We want to make sure that we're building that succession plan into volunteers so that people do not feel again like they are forced to volunteer, that if they do not volunteer bad things are going to happen, um, and that they are leaving legacy and helping to train the next generation of key volunteers. So if anyone is interested in being a key volunteer, again, please reach out. You can hit us up in Slack. You can shoot us an email. We'd love to pair you with a volunteer, with a key volunteer, to help give some of that training, to let you shadow and see what's going on behind the scenes. Um, because that's what we have to do ultimately. We need to train more key volunteers. We need a lot more people in almost all of the roles, because those are the critical ones, and those are the ones that, as someone mentioned, they can't walk in off the street. So anyone who's in this chat would probably be very
Well suited.
yeah. And to answer that last one that just came in, so they don't all lead to shadowing, um, and that nomination is managed by First HQ. So that is correct. Um, but those roles where we can get people in, or the role where we can get people experienced, or at least having conversations with key volunteers about their job experience, we certainly want to make sure that is happening.
Yes.
Something I do want to mention, just in case people didn't see it, but we do have Maryland Education Day, which is at Howard County College on November 4th. If you want to register for that, I think registrations are still open. I'll drop the link for Matt to share in the chat, but that's an excellent opportunity for for mentors to connect and learn more about the season, about FRC. I think they just released their schedule, and it looks like they're doing everything from programming to DEI work to fundraising. So it's certainly a worthwhile, especially if you can get there and make it in person. Um, so yeah, I did want to plug that because that came by today. Yes, you can reach out to Rose as always, because Rose is so wonderful. Thank you, Rose.
So many. Thank you all for being active in our comment section. It's buzzing. So it was one thing about the TAC being centered around Richmond area. We want to increase. So please, if that feels off to you, then please sign up, reach out, and we can get you plugged in with it. That is one way we can circumvent that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the charter that was up there, I think, was last edited in 2020. So we've just been re-looking at that. We want to make sure that it's up to date and empowers TAC to do what they need to do, and it is not restrictive. So again, I think that's a predecessor from an earlier time, that charter. But yes, the TAC ideally is representative of all of the district, so people all over the place, not just Richmond or Norfolk or even just Virginia. Yeah, so certainly if you are not from those areas and you're interested in being a part of TAC, we would love to have you apply when we open up those applications. TAC is selected from staff and from the current TAC, but we do keep in mind geographic representation. And there's also a couple of special roles, one that we're toying with for an alumni position who would be on TAC, and one for the Chairman's Award, the Inspire Award winner, a representative from that team. So when that charter is finished, we can get it all buttoned up and we'll hit publish and we can send that out to everyone for their review. That will be well in advance of when elections and nominations take place. But absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Impact Award. I was new in here, so yeah. Let's see. There's a couple of comments about communication styles and preferences. So email is always going to be our number one way to communicate with teams and coaches. We get those contacts from First Inspires is like the official email. So if that email that you're using on your first dashboard is not the one that you check, please make sure that you update it to the email that you do check. And if you would like to have it in multiple formats, you can always subscribe. There's a subscribe box at the footer of our website now, so people can go on and register with that. But email is always going to be number one. We're going to try and follow up in Slack, maybe a little bit before or just after an email goes out. So we're iterating that information and we're trying our best to keep the website updated. It is a little bit of a behemoth right now, but we're trimming pages. So we do apologize if you find something that is out of date. Please let us know because we will either bring it back up to date or probably take it down more likely. But yes, that was a question that's come up too. That was from Caroline. Thank you, Caroline.
Oh, Barkley. Sorry, my dog is over here being crazy. All right, so I know we have a few more that I wanted to take a look at. I think with a lot of the questions in that part we dealt with. So, so one question I saw, Texas Robot 95, you're probably the MVP for the chat today. Are we going to have a comment on what is the plan forward once the travel grant window closes and eventually not what they need to look like? We have a plan forward. Our goal is to not cancel any of the events we currently have scheduled for reasons we said a few times. We do not want to disadvantage all of the teams that are already at those events. We had around 20 some teams before we started running into issues and we had to try to fill those last remaining slots. We did not want to disadvantage the 20 some teams that had originally signed up for Blacksburg or originally signed up for Portsmouth. So the goal is to keep them alive. We did what we could over the last week and so to keep that going. And then there are some key dates that are available that First has available that we just couldn't do anything about yet because it's headquarter rules. So one I just saw come up, third plays, out of district plays. Yes, those are in the works, but that wasn't something that we could have done last week. So if you were concerned about it canceling, well, we still had to wait for November 7th, I believe, is when the out of district plays open up. And I believe today, right, was the opening for third plays. So there was nothing that we could have done about those two aspects. But our goal is to make sure that we have all of these events on the schedule now happening come March. So we've been working, we're gonna do what we can. And even if that means we have to ask for some kind of exemption to keep it, we're going to do what we can to keep it alive. Actually today, I can't tell you who, but I was talking to a team that is interested in coming from out of district to fill one of those open spots. There are people interested. We just have to wait for the timeline on that regard. So we are working. It's in works right now. And after the shuffling we did last week, if we can maintain what we have in place, it is if we can maintain what we have in place, then we shouldn't have any issues. Waiving fees. I don't know if we went that far yet.
So I would have to check with First HQ. I don't know that we actually have control over that for FRC. Um, I can check. I think we already have teams that are interested despite the fees, so we probably wouldn't. Um, but had we not have teams who are interested, we would. I also love how smart our community is. Nothing gets by you all. It's really quite impressive.
Yeah, they are on it. Um, cool. Uh, one that just came up. It's a good idea. I'm gonna look into that. Can we have a volunteer advisory committee? Honestly, I was just talking with Shelly Stoddard about that, our FTC director. She's wonderful. If you haven't met her yet, and that is something that we are looking into. So we are heavily invested and refining and improving our volunteer process. And that's to the full extent that we have control. So volunteer advisory committee, we will look into that. Yeah, that's a great idea. So I'll put it down and I'll bring it up at the next meeting we have about how we're going to move forward with volunteers, because we know that it is a problem and we have to solve it. Um, so actually having this committee would be wonderful, because one of the issues that we ran into that was discussed was with there being changeover from year to year, different roles, and with the last few years being quite tumultuous in terms of changeover, we there were some connections that were lost because the system wasn't in place to make sure communication was there. So we are addressing these issues to make sure that we put systems in place so that even if some people move on, find better positions, have to change for some reason, the information and the resources they gathered are not lost. So those are all things that we're doing to improve where we are now, because we don't want to be in the same position next year that we're in this year. Please trust and believe us. Everybody at First Chesapeake right now is of the same mind. We are focused on making improvements to the best of our abilities in all the ways that we can. And with organizations, there's red tape and there's some things that we don't always have control over. And as your leaders, you're going to take it out on us, and we get that. That's fine. But we want you to understand that we're going to do what we can in order to make these improvements. And the last 2 weeks, it's the end of my second week, and I know that that has been a firm foundation for where everybody is on our staff right now. So all the information coming out, the things that some of you all are already bringing up, we've been talking about it. We have our own Slack channels, and we've been talking about a lot of this. So thank you. We're working. We're working. I promise you, we're working.
Yeah.
Alex, anything else you want to add on that one? I see the
Yeah,
time.
maybe we can conclude with this one last question, and just what steps is CHS taking to ensure that leadership is approachable and available for questions and concerns? Um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think step one is we're getting the people in place where they need to be, and we're making sure that they're not overburdened and their heads divided 10 different ways. We want to have people who are dedicated to FRC, to FTC. Ultimately, one day we would like to bring back a development and volunteer person, and specifically to events. That's a big one for us. So as the team grows and solidifies and comes into its own, I want everyone in the community to feel free to send us an email, hit us up in Slack. We're always available to talk, and we're always happy to talk. As I said earlier, you guys are so incredibly intelligent, and you're just so quick with everything, um, that you have so many of great ideas and the right answers. And we want to hear them. We want to know what they are well in advance of us making a mistake or taking a wrong step. We want to be open, and we want to have your trust. And we know that's a journey, and that's we're day one, right, Isaiah? So, you know, we appreciate everyone tuning in, everyone's time, and their willingness to improve. Because I think at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, right? We want to make this program as amazing for as many students in our district as possible. And I know that we're going to do it together. So if you ever feel uncomfortable talking to one of us, um, please feel free to reach out to TAC. That's another mechanism that you have there. We, are accountable to them, and uh, we really, really respect their opinion and their time. So, um, yeah, please feel free to reach out. And I'm, I hope that this time next year it'll feel like it's easier to strike up a conversation with us.
This time next year, it will feel like it's easier to strike up a conversation with us. I don't normally toot my own horn, but that was one question that I decided I needed to. That what they did was they hired me, and I'm going to make sure that we're approachable. I care about people in this community, so I'm going to do what I can to make sure that we're all on the same page. And everybody I've interacted with so far has been wonderful folks. So we're going to make sure we continue to push that. There's some concerns that have come up, some things that we did not get to address just yet. So we are going to do what we can to cover that. I'm going to start sending out FRC links. This will be our FRC newsletter. It'll be called FRC Link. And also, I will be having office hours starting up next week. So I will get that information publicized. That way you all can sign up. So we'll be doing, for me, Mondays from 11 to 1 and Thursdays from 4 to 6. So there were some people that were like, how can we get in touch with you? How can we do this? How can we talk about that? This is one great time that I'll be open and we can get started to do that. So I got 2 times a week. I'll be traveling on Fridays, so I did not do that. But Mondays, 11 to 1, Thursdays, 4 to 6 p.m. I'll have that available, and I'll make sure I get that information out to as many people as possible. So please reach out to us, send us your concerns. If there was something that you saw last year and you don't think word got around to it, let us know, because we want to make sure that we are going to improve. And yes, I'm going to be at the event next Saturday. So that event in DC. And I'm going to try to have one more time where I'll make it. We were supposed to be here for an hour, so I don't want to say too much more. But I am having a baby in December, so my travel is going to be kind of limited. But they do have me coming to an event in December, so I'm going to make it around so that way you all can see my face a little bit more. And so yes, I'm going to be there, and I'll try to get up in that way to just meet some of you maybe in your workspace one day, and see if I can just tag along and see what's up. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all your questions, your feedback. Please contact us, hit me up, let me know if something's going on. I am here to help you. I'm here to serve you. I'm not just here to sit in the background and just, collect a check. I'm here to help you. So let me help you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.